Folks spill into the audience. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Schmidt. I'm host for this room and club. And as we're on standby for everyone to arrive, just a couple of Clubhouse pointers, especially for those that are new. Please use the little share button at the bottom of your screen. It's the little upload icon, and share this. You can share this room on social media. You can share it directly with others. If you're inviting others directly that you think may be interested and you have a lot of followers, you can narrow the search by using words like clinical trials or research. We do highly encourage everyone to select the share on Clubhouse option. That'll help increase the likelihood that somebody will come across this room in the hallways. And the chat feature is enabled for this session. So for those that like to use that, I'll do my best to be moderating that if there's questions, things like that. Also feel free to back message me with any messages or questions or thoughts as well. Be sure to check out and follow everyone in the room, any speakers that inspire you, follow our moderators and panelists. We do encourage audience participation, so if you find yourself inspired to speak, please feel free to raise your digital hand. We do our best to get to everyone. And note, our club is called Consuli Conversations. In addition to this room, we host a few other rooms. We have a Data Dignity, Dealing You into the Data Economy Clubhouse, a Long COVID Where Patients Meet Researchers room, and a room dedicated to sickle cell where we explore the question of how solving sickle cell disease relates to health equity. You can learn more by following our club, Consuli Conversations. Just tap the little greenhouse at the top, give it a follow, and then in our profile, you'll see all our upcoming rooms. For any direct questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, if you would like to join this panel in the future or have someone to recommend, my email is in my bio, so please reach out directly. Love hearing from you guys, always. And you'll also find all Consuli socials there, so give us a follow on all those platforms. For those that don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with the mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy. Experts suggest our individual data is worth $20,000 per year, so we help people choose who gets access to and how their personal information is used, and if and when desired, get them paid for their data and make medicine better. So we do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent, and our members receive smart-matched, individualized offers from us for opportunities, including to participate in clinical trials and data trials. There is no cost to join our movement. You can learn more about it at consuli.net. That's consuli.net. I will be pinning that to the top of the room. Apologies, I think it didn't stick the first time I did it, so we will try again. Here we go. That should do it. And also keep an eye. I will be pinning various things to the top of the room throughout the conversation. And shortly, I'll also pin a virtual whiteboard where you're welcome to peruse past conversations, topics that have been discussed here, and as well as add any comments and suggestions and ideas to it. So really fun interactive board that we're building out. And it's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to our room co-facilitators, Michael and Sophie, who will be introducing themselves, our expert guests. Michael, now over to you.
No, thank you, Julie. Hopefully you can hear me now that I'm off mute. First of all, great introductions here. We've got a wonderful, wonderful panel put together. There are so many good thinkers and experienced individuals who are a part of the panel. We're going to get a chance to give them each 30 seconds to introduce themselves in just a moment. But I wanted to welcome all of you to our clubhouse. This is Clinical Trials Clubhouse. We welcome clinical trialists, pharmaceutical industry execs, and importantly, patients interested in solving burning questions in clinical trials. We're very fortunate, as you noted, that we are working with Consuli, which is an innovative team who are enabling data for good, and in this case, specifically around healthcare and clinical trials. Just as background, I wanted to, if you have just joined, I wanted to reiterate that we planned during our Clinical Trials Clubhouse in June, our group formally submitted a crowdsourced response to FDA's April 2022 draft guidance called Diversity Plans to Improve Enrollment of Participants from Underrepresented Racial and Ethnic Subgroups in Clinical Trials. There was a formal docket number, which is available, and what we decided to do is to take that construct which we submitted called JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and we want to now begin to define success within that construct. So here for July, we will start with justice as our one burning question, our OBQ. And we phrase that as, quote, how can clinical trial design and operation ensure equitable patient selection, uphold patients' rights, and provide data transparency to enrollees, end quote. So I know that sounded like a lot of bureaucratese, but the reality is we recognize that there are many patients who get enrolled in clinical trials who do not effectively know what their rights might be within that trial, what justice needs to be done to their line of sight into the data being collected, and what will be done with that data. So we'd like to get this conversation started, but before we do that, Sophie, since you are now on board here, I'd like to have you introduce yourself and take us forward with introductions.
Thanks, Michael. I made it.
Yay!
I always love this room, this discussion every month. I so look forward to it. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Sophie Johannan. I am a clinical scientist right now at a medical device company, and I have 19 years of experience in clinical research before this at multiple different institutions, locations, and in multiple different roles and therapeutic areas. So I I have a vested interest in ensuring that we are, getting the best sample size, the best wide swath of patient population in our clinical trial enrollment, and we're getting also accurate data, and we are ethically consenting and enrolling patients. So that's how I got started with this topic here. And I am just so excited to have everyone. We have such a great panel. And really, I love taking the opportunity each month to bring all of you together from different corners of the industry and sometimes patients also to talk about what's important. We'll be opening the discussion this month with the one burning question that Michael talked about already. But before we do that, let's say hello to each of our panelists. Like Michael said, we're going to have 30 seconds for each panelist to introduce himself or herself. So we can go in pull to refresh or PTR order. What that means for anyone who's new to Clubhouse or is not aware is that we start at the top left and move to the right and then from top down. And that's how we'll move through discussions also, unless someone has a burning question or a comment that fits in a particular spot. And then if you flash your mic slowly, that indicates that you have something to say, and Michael is demonstrating that right now. That's how you let us know that you have something to say. And then if you want to agree or applaud someone else's comments, you can flash your mic quickly. And Michael's demonstrating that again. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. So that's some of the housekeeping for us, and let's get on with these introductions. So let's start with B, Sloan at the top left, and make our way to the right and from the top to down. Go ahead.
Brittany?
Hello, I'm sorry. I was trying to find the unmute button. Good morning, y'all on the West Coast. I'm coming to y'all on the East Coast, so it's 15 minutes to 2. I missed the West Coast, so I hope y'all are enjoying it. I am coming to y'all representing, a crossover of two perspectives. My professional perspective is well, I've had 14 years of experience. My last recent position was regulatory specialist with USC with the ATRI group, if anybody's familiar, that focuses on therapeutic trials for AD participants and Down syndrome people. I left that position back in January. I've taken a 6-month hiatus from working. And so for this conversation, I'll be coming to you from the perspective mostly of my nonprofit, which is called Black Research Matters. And I'm the founder of that. And so quickly, Black Research Matters is a safe space free of criticism and judgment for Black people to discuss and learn more about research with the purposes of, one, strengthening the community by becoming better informed decision makers, but also the individual as well. So the goal here generally within this organization is to enhance autonomy through education, specifically with Black people. I'm sorry,
Excellent.
and that's
And
it for
Brittany,
me.
that's
Good
okay.
morning.
Since I know you're new to this, um, part of the etiquette here is when you're done speaking, you can say, "And I'm done speaking."
Yes, thank you. And I'm done speaking.
Excellent. Jane?
Hello, good morning. My name is Jane Miles, and I'm delighted to be here to learn from all of you. I have worked in the industry longer than I care to tell you, doing a lot of different things on the sponsor side, including everything through the whole clinical development plan to registrational approval, eventually running an internal consultancy group on clinical trial innovation and its application in global trials. Now I work at a tech startup trying to modernize clinical trials, partly so we do get more people who would not typically be in a trial to participate in trials. And that is it. I am done speaking.
Guess I'm up next. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm excited to learn from everybody. My name is Sol. I'm the former co-founder of Clara Health. Our mission at Clara was to democratize access to clinical trials for individuals of all backgrounds. So we focused mainly on making the recruitment, enrollment, and retention experience more patient-centric. But in that, a lot of what we talked about was justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So really excited to learn from everybody here. That's it for me.
Sol, thank you so much for being here. Big fan of Evan, so know you guys well.
Yeah, we're a big fan of you too, so thanks for having me.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, thank you for clarifying. I can't follow who's next. So, hi everybody. I'm Jennifer Bonfrisco. Like everyone on the panel, I've been in the industry for most of my life, which is, over 30 years in working in different aspects of clinical development, large pharma, small pharma, and in the last really 6 years, I started my own consulting firm. It's focusing on clinical operations primarily, but like this discussion point, my goal was to make trials more accessible to more people. I was working to open up sites in underdeveloped, poorly represented communities. That's always been a big challenge, getting buy-in from people. But that was my original goal. As things have morphed and changed, I find my hands in all kinds of strange places. Sounds weird, but last month I really got, and I'm still very involved in preclinical aspects, and working with a great partner in Mexico, trying to bring some trials down there. So, my work is pretty diverse. It's basically doing anything we can to make trials more streamlined and getting to more people. And I'm done speaking.
Hello, my name is Brandy Starks. I'm the founder of the nonprofit Clinical Trials in Color Foundation. We're a research advocacy organization for communities of color. I'm also a patient experience advocate, and I sit on a few committees and boards. I'm also a research participant, and I've been a clinical research professional for the past 15 years. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm done speaking.
Michael, I think you're next in PTR order, but did you already introduce yourself?
I did. Essentially, what you need to know about me is that I love people and I love finding out what they are thinking. So we've put this room together and I'm happy to have you here. So why don't you go ahead and go next?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Gundlach. Work with Mayo Clinic in their research endeavors. I've had about an 18-year career in research, but most of that actually on the laboratory side. Moved over to primarily clinical trials about 3.5 years ago. So I'm that new guy in the room that's wondering why everything works the way it does and asking the questions that people get annoyed with. About 6 months ago, I moved over to Mayo Clinic's external facing consulting group. So we work with institutions who either don't do research yet and are looking to start, or do a little bit and are looking to grow or expand their research enterprises. And as you can imagine, we get a lot of questions along the, everybody's wrestling with these questions right now, and we get client questions about them, and we aren't necessarily that well suited to answer them. So I love joining in these spaces. I always learn more than I have to share, but I take so much back that I can share with the people I work with. Justin, I'm done speaking.
Justin, you're being way too modest. We greatly appreciate your involvement. And now the unmistakable and always effervescent Amy Sitnick.
I love you, Michael. Michael's just like me, and we just love people, and I think it shows. So, everyone, so great to be here today. I'm Amy Sitnick. I head marketing at a technology company called Greenfire. We specialize in many things, anything financial services related within the clinical trial space. But the main purpose of being here today is really talking about sort of our experience in removing, sort of financial and logistical burdens, which often impede clinical trial participants, from remaining in studies, and disproportionately people that may, come from certain ethnic backgrounds. So pleasure to be here today. I'm really appreciative to be part of this conversation, very passionate about diversity, and have had a long tenure in terms of even before Greenfire doing things with regards to social justice. So really appreciate being included. And that is my introduction for today.
Awesome. Brad.
Hey guys, my name is Brad Hightower. I've worked at the site level for almost 15 years now, across academia, and worked in private hospitals as well. Now we run a integrated site network where we primarily partner with private practice and community physicians, also working with some rural hospitals and whatnot. I also do a podcast for clinical research sites and have a small community called Clinical Trial Confidential. I obviously, at this point, live and breathe clinical trials, so just happy to be here in a room full of people smarter than me, and that's it.
Thanks, Brad.
Awesome.
Scott, you I know you have been so busy starting this whole new venture of yours, but as truly one of the Renaissance men of the clinical trials world, greatly appreciate you being here. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Wow. Thanks, Michael. Yes. I'll see if I can live up to the Renaissance label. Goodness. I'm really, like everyone else, I'm thrilled to just be part of this great group. I'm thrilled to contribute and also hopefully learn a little bit more and hear some different perspectives. Like many of the folks here, I'm a clinical development executive. I've been in the clinical trial space for, coming up on finishing my third decade here. I'm really passionate and focused on including the patient perspective and patient experience and how we design clinical trials. I'm really passionate about making sure our trials are designed with the ultimate stakeholders in mind, namely patients, and that they're done in a way that works for patients and families and they're realistic. And I'm also really focused. So
Scott, we lost you.
I kind of live in that clinical space and trying to keep patients in mind. Yeah, am I breaking up there, Michael?
Yeah, just a little bit. At least for me, you are.
Yeah, it
Hopefully,
sounds like you're in the matrix a little bit. You want to move slightly into an area of better reception, maybe.
I will move, but why don't, sure, let me wrap up my intro and pass it along and I'll find a better spot to be.
Awesome.
cool.
I think
Edie.
that I was gonna say I think that means it's me, and we'll pivot back to you, Scott. I can't believe I'm actually bringing up the rear here. So this is Edie Edens. As Michael was generously introducing me earlier, I am a licensed attorney and professional international research ethicist who works primarily in the United States, but sometimes also abroad for a firm called First Class Solutions. And I specialize in research compliance, research ethics, and all things clinical research and clinical trials, and have the privilege to not only be a part of this group and a longtime listener, every time caller, but also was part of these wonderful efforts to make a formal comment to the FDA with Michael and Sophie and support from Elizabeth and others, and some great ideas from folks on the line like Jennifer and Scott. And so I'm really excited that we're going to dissect these issues. I have a lot to say about justice, especially coming from a Belmont report perspective, given my particular background. And fun fact, if you can hear a bunch of noise in the background, it's because I'm living at a lake for this month as a digital nomad with my family. And there's a giant cigar boat competition coming this weekend. And so all the really loud, really expensive, really gas guzzling boats are outside practicing right now. So with that, I will pass it back to Scott if you're possibly in a better position. And if not, we'll let the games begin and we'll let you speak in, Scott, when you're able. This is Edie. I'm complete.
Well, thanks, Edie. Hopefully I'm in a better position. I'm not
Woohoo!
sure where I
Much
got.
better.
Oh, good.
Much
Yay.
better. Much better.
Celebrate.
It's
Celebration.
almost 3D.
Excellent. Well, I'll try to keep it brief here. I don't know where I broke up, but essentially a patient-focused clinical trialist, and I'm really passionate about making sure patients and their voice and their perspective and their experience is built into clinical trials, and I'm really committed to ensuring clinical trials can work for families and patients, and that they're not as burdensome or as time consuming or as travel requiring as they have been historically. And also really interested in doing anything we can around communication to improve access both before, during, and after clinical trials, and being able to share information a little more transparently with patients. So again, crossing my fingers for a really strong cellular connection here for the next hour.
We're losing you again, Scott, just FYI. I was going to say, but you got to the end of your intro. You got there.
You got it in. We'll take it. Thank you so much, Scott. And
Thanks,
Edie
Scott.
and Brad and Justin, Amy I'm meeting for the first time, Brandy and Sol, Jennifer, who has been here from pretty much the very beginning, and Brittany, thank you for Jane. I think we've met before, and Brittany, I'm so excited to have you. We have such a great panel today. And Justin, in case no one has told you, your questions are impeccable. Please don't stop asking questions. I love your questions. That's what makes the world go round. That's how we learn. That's how we grow and move forward. So, yeah, never stop. So, we're going to start with our panelists and then open it up to everyone else here. Just another housekeeping note for all of you, especially for those of you who are newer to Clubhouse. We bring up people who we know have a background that is relevant to this room, this club, this topic. So if you are interested in raising your hand and coming to the stage to speak, if you have a question or a comment or something to add, please make sure that your profile is filled out with something about your background that lets us know what's relevant to this topic, this room, this club. And then either Julie or Michael or I will bring you up. All right. So with that, let's remind you of the OBQ today, and let's get started. So as we planned in the June Clubhouse, our group formally submitted a crowdsourced response to FDA's April 2022 draft guidance, which was read, diversity plans to improve enrollment of participants from underrepresented racial and ethnic subgroups in clinical trials. We will now begin to define the success in this initiative by discussing JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This month, we are starting with justice as our OBQ. How can clinical trial design and operation ensure equitable patient selection, uphold patients' rights, and provide data transparency to enrollees? So with that, I would love to pass the mic first to Brittany, and then we can move in PTR order like I described before, left to right, top to bottom. And if you have a burning question or comment that has to go in between, just let us know by slow tapping your mic. Go ahead, Brittany.
Alrighty. So I sat with this question for a while, and I realized that I was getting frustrated with coming up with an answer, because I think it's a wonderful open-ended question, but I think it's an uphill question that can't be answered in one response, and I think we all know that. And also, I don't think that we're there yet. I don't think we're ready to address that question. I think that, in my opinion, we have to take a step back to understand how we got here, for us to determine how to move forward on such a complex topic. Before the conversations about revising a CRO system, we must first all get on the same page on how you define justice. And this is an easy Google search. We all work in research. We should have an idea of this. Edie also said the Belmont, referenced the Belmont report, so we should be familiar with that. But what I've noticed is that there's a interchange between all levels of research, even higher leadership, IRB directors, project directors, again, and all roles in between, where equity and equality are terms that are being used interchangeably. And I think, first of all, we have to get on the same page with that. When it comes to the actual definition, I looked up on dictionary.com and Merriam-Webster, and it talks about things related to righteousness and being just, and moral rightness, and the maintenance and administration of what is considered just, especially by the adjustment of conflicting claims or the assignment of rewards or punishments. But as I continued this wide search of justice, help me define justice. How do you define justice? I found that the definition says what we believe. It's about equity. But then I noticed that the interpretation is mostly inconsistent from what I just read to y'all of the definitions and what we believe and what we know to be true, actually. And as I looked at these aids and these graphics and basically these PowerPoint slides that I was finding under, there was reference to equal, or giving everyone an equal chance. And as I looked at that and spent more time with that, I found that, like, this is the human perspective of what this means, the human interpretation of it. Though I think this is where for me, where the issue lies is the definition, and then the interpretation, and then how we move about, like, in that regard. So when we talk about bringing justice forward in regard to underrepresented people in clinical trials, first we have to agree on what justice means, and we all have to agree that it's about equity, not equality, and that we can't leave the people behind who don't get it, because we all know PIs who are older people, set in their ways, whatever, key stakeholders and whatnot, high leadership. And we can't leave them in the dust just because we have a better understanding. These are still our colleagues, and they still have impact in the field. So let's say that we go on to agree that this is about equity. And from there, if you want justice within the CRO framework, we still have to acknowledge that each population may require different distinct variables. And I think we all agree on that, but we don't agree on how that method should be carried out exactly. And I think that we have to understand, and I know we talk about this often, just in research, that we can't do a one size fits all model. This conversation, this question, this overhaul, this change requires a great deal of diligence from the research team and the CRO alike. The same effort that goes into like general study startup with these meetings and these third party consultants and whatnot. So my answer to the question is that I think this requires dedication and effort, but from a more technical perspective, when it comes to like the trial design, selection, upholding patient rights and transparency, well, first of all, when it comes to patient rights, it's the responsibility of all of us in clinical research to uphold this. We didn't take an oath, but it's our duty, and we are tasked with ensuring the safety and the protected human experience of research. So additionally, I would say that engaging in local collaborations with community leaders is necessary for the comprehension of the needs, as well as maintaining the recruitment and the retention aspect. It's a movement and not a quick fix. And so that's why with this question, I think it's difficult to answer. How do we address justice in terms of the JEDI concept, to the trial and to the selection and the rights and the transparency. I mean, before we even do all that, we have to understand that this is much bigger than just coming up with an answer to those specific areas, that we have to recognize that this is going to take a great deal of dedication, time, effort, genuine time and effort spent within these communities. And I think generally, when I step back and think about how Black Research Matters was created, how and where, and the frustration that I created it from, being a Black woman, being a Black woman in research, I find that oftentimes we overlook this more emotional side of research or science altogether. And in order to build the trust that we need with these underrepresented groups, this is the root of the resistance, is the lack of trust. And how do you build that? We have to go into a more emotional space and have that conversation. I know a lot of us don't want to. We're scientists, we're Black and white thinkers. But again, this is going to come down to dedication from all levels on the CRO front and leadership, effort in terms of time and money, and also diversity within the field. I know we've all heard this, but representation matters. It's important. Right now, when I look at this panel, Brandy and I are the only two women of color. There aren't any, I don't believe there's a man, and
Hey,
I'm just speaking
don't
from
leave
the
me out here.
Black perspective. Sorry. And I'm just saying, generally, I'm recognizing that when we have these conversations, it's great.
No, I hear
But
you.
if we're not having additional perspectives added that actually look different, then we're just having a lot of the same conversations. And I don't know how much that's permeating. I'm coming from the perspective right now of Black people. I don't know how much
Yep.
of that is permeating to the Black people, because we don't, I mean, a number of people aren't looking Black, and it should not come down to that all the time. But
No, you're
in this
right. You're right,
instance,
Brittany.
of mistrust, we have to build people up to feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah,
And
we've talked about
so
that
that's what I end
before.
with,
You're
and I'm done.
No,
Yeah,
that's
you're actually echoing a lot of the things that we've said before about not only diversity in clinical trial enrollees, but also in professionals, right? So from the PIs, sub-Is to clinical research coordinators, data managers, to everyone at the CRO level and the sponsor level and partners, vendors, even, all of that matters. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. I was just kidding before when I said don't leave me out. But we're kind of a more jovial group, you'll find. But yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. It has to start at the root, at the people who are initiating these trials, designing these trials, and you know, looking for the patients to enroll. It definitely is not going to start with the patients. So kudos to you. Did you want
Brittany.
to add?
I just wanted to add one thought here, and that is, obviously, um, we're making a very real attempt not to boil the ocean here. And as a result, we're trying to get focused on the justice piece of this. but everything you brought up are clearly part of this humongous puzzle that needs to be, assembled. And you are absolutely right. It will take more than a village. It's going to take a huge global effort to ultimately reach the changes that will be needed. But we felt we had to start at one corner of this, and that's the reason why I think we're looking specifically at the justice piece of this, where in recognizing that there's a lot of injustice that has been done over the years. And I thought the most important point you brought up, Brittany, was around the issues of trust. And I know several members within this group are just jonesing to get in here and comment. So if it's okay, let's move on to Jane.
Well, I
And
just
Jane,
quickly want to
sure.
emphasize. Yes, I understand. I may be boiling the ocean, as you may say. But my first point was that I think that there's inconsistency with the definition of justice,
Oh,
even though we have a
absolutely,
very clear
absolutely.
definition. And so before we can even, I think, in my opinion, like start to throw things on the wall to see what sticks, we have to all, not just in this room, but generally, and this is the uphill part, that I think is consistent with this question, is that I would say you have to take a step back and we have to decide and agree and move forward on what is the definition of justice and how are we going to showcase that. And I'm not just saying that as like, step one is that you brainstorm. I'm saying that from my own personal perspective, and that I have engaged with people who have my age years, my 40 years of research or medical research, that have argued with me that the definition of justice, or in terms of the Belmont report, is that it's supposed to be equal. And that is just not true. That is just not true. And that is a lot of the problem, is that within our own organization, we have people who are arguing points that just are inaccurate. I'm done.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that perspective. We appreciate that a great deal. Um, Jane, would you like to weigh in on this?
I'll give it a try. So first, I'm going to frame this from my history. I am a Canadian, and I say it proudly, in part because the right to health care is part of the fabric of the Canadian values and identities. So living in the US, I am still conflicted and puzzled by the lack of this as a fundamental human right. I just don't get it. We'll put that aside for the moment. But until we get to a place where access to care first is, I'll say, an element of justice, I think we have even further to go in clinical trials. So now I'm going to go into the practical part, because that's sort of theoretical and high level. One of the things that gives me some hope, and maybe it's even actionable, a small step, is today, if you are watching, the Society for Clinical Research published information about how they have made a formal proposal to CMS to ensure that patients who use Medicaid can get access to clinical trial participation, because currently the Medicaid system is not required to pay for clinical trial procedures. I don't mean the experimental part of the trial. I mean the standard of care. And so I didn't even know that was a problem. But if that's a barrier for patients who use those services, no wonder we are still struggling to get enrolled patients who are typically not those who would participate. I'm not saying it very elegantly, but there are so many fundamental barriers and inequities. We got to start with something actionable, in my opinion. And that's all I can say at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane, for your perspective. And we're putting these together one by one. So next we have Sol. So would you like to share your perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks so much to both of Jane and Brittany. Those were great points. I especially agree. It's such a huge question, and definitely agree that, there are actionable things we can do. But I think understanding the scope of how large the actual thing of like, how do we operationalize more equitable patient selection, and starting with the definition of equality versus equity. This was definitely something at Clara where we would talk to people with 20 years of experience who pretty much treated it as like equality and didn't really understand the differences of equity and equality. The classic, like, individuals on a box trying to watch a baseball game, and it's like you give everyone the same size box, or you base the boxes based on height, as like a simple definition of equality versus equity. I think, like, especially over the last year, the thing that comes to mind to me to demonstrate our kind of lack of understanding and the need to better define the industry on equality versus equity has been decentralized clinical trials. So I see a lot of people equate DCTs with this will kind of solve the DE&I problem, because geographic barriers are the thing holding back DE&I. And I think this is a classic, like, oh, well, DCTs do that, therefore diversity, but that's really an equal opportunity. It's not equity. If you were really looking at it from equity, you need to take into account a lot more, like, well, DCTs really don't solve
Yep,
like
it's not the whole
all
story.
aspects of diversity. Right, exactly, right? Like, you have things like internet access. A lot of people in rural areas don't actually have at-home internet, don't have smartphones, don't have comfort with technology. So I think, like, the industry as a whole, I see as very surface level of, they're just like, oh, this is a buzzword, DCTs is a buzzword, DE&I is a buzzword. This seems to solve it, because from my perspective as a wealthy individual, if I could participate from my home, it would be easier. But we saw this with telehealth in general, actually, in like the mental health space, where a lot of telemedicine and like therapy moved to telehealth over COVID, and it actually resulted in yes, more access to like therapy in general, but it was more access specifically in people who already had access. So like generally wealthy white individuals could access therapy even easier than before, and people who were minorities didn't access it that much more at all. Because it didn't take into account things like, well, if I am a hourly worker, it doesn't matter that you moved your therapy online. Like, I still cannot get on my phone during like 3 p.m. to get on a therapy appointment. Or that in clinical research too, I see this a lot, especially with my own family. I manage care for my mom, and she says, like, well, I want to be seen by someone who speaks my language, Mandarin, or I want to be seen by someone who looks like me, because otherwise I don't trust it. And I think a lot of clinical research, I mean, it's largely, we don't see a lot of diversity in the people actually practicing and like giving the care out in general. And I think that is a big thing, where you look at trust, you look at equitable patient selection, and it's like we need to do so much breaking down of what our healthcare system even looks like to make that happen. So it's not as simple as a one quick fix. So that's all I have for now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sol. Yeah, you brought in a couple of extra points there. I have seen DCT described as the fix-all. And yeah, it's just part of the puzzle. It's a great part, but it's not the whole story, right? So we really have to think about this from all different angles. So I would love to hear from Jennifer next.
Okay, hi, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sol. I think that was brilliant what you said, and what I agree with, taking it down to the fundamental level, is how do we operationalize it? That's really it. Um, and decentralized trials are lovely, but there are still many trials that cannot be decentralized. Like right now, I'm working on an ophthalmology program. The patients have to come in weekly. We have to look at them. The PI has to look at them. So there are many programs that just won't really be decentralized. So how do we fix that? And I think it goes back to the very beginning when we think about where we're placing these studies. And we talk about it a lot. Let's open centers in other than the places we always go. We always go to MD Anderson and NYU, and we go to the big places because they're easy. We know the process. They tend to have the patient populations, and there's barriers for big pharma, small pharma. We know all of us, biotech, because when somebody says, okay, I'm going to open a center in, downtown Camden, or a center that, a place they're not used to, they just don't always know how to do it. And they just go to the ones they know. So I think that's the basic part, thinking for sponsors to start thinking earlier on about being more diverse in where they place the trials. It helps a lot. Another story I have, and Edie and I work with a brilliant, and Antonio, who's sometimes on our panel, he heads up a CRO in Mexico. So this ophthalmology program that I'm running, we can't enroll patients. We don't have enough patients here. He found many patients in Mexico, but there's barriers for us to get these sites open in Mexico. But the patients are there. So, what I'm trying to say to sponsors is to seriously think ahead about where we start. Because if we just open at the same centers we open every time, we're going to get the same results. So, I think it's trying to speak to the, powers above to say, as part of your clinical development plan, not only is it the right thing to do, it's the right thing for your business because you will enroll better. So if we get people in management thinking like that at the beginning, I think, we're set up in a better way as the studies move on. So I hand it over to Justin.
Oh, I think I'm next, right?
Yep. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
go ahead,
please,
Brandy.
Brandy.
Okay. Thank you. I love the point that, that Brittany made. And I think it's important that we do think about it a little bit more globally. When you have a country that was built on and thrives on injustice, it makes it very challenging for us, right? I also want to say that underserved doesn't mean poor. And sometimes I think that comes across in conversations. I consider myself underserved, but I live in an affluent community. I have a high income. I should have access to any and everything that I want to. But I can tell you, I've never been asked to participate in a clinical trial, ever. And I worked at a major healthcare system. I worked at and was seen at a major healthcare system in Los Angeles. So I don't have all the answers. I mean, I can go through and check off some boxes. I can say, yeah, engage with community physicians, talk to, advocacy groups. You can do all of those things. We've been saying the same thing for years. I haven't seen much progress, but I think, at least with Brittany and I, because we have worked together, is you have to talk to the people. And I'm not talking about necessarily people who identify themselves as patients, because most of us identify as just people, right? So it's about talking to like just the everyday person. What is your experience like with our healthcare system? What does research mean to you? Have you ever been asked, what would that look like for you? In what situation can you find yourself being asked to participate? And I feel like we don't talk to people. We think we have the answers on their behalf. And so I ask my family all the time. I've got 50 something family members that I asked, have you ever been asked to participate in clinical research? They said no. I said, but if you were asked, would you? And they said, you know what? I would really think about that. But no one has asked them. So can we solve that problem? And that's what I have to say.
Brandy, I love what you're saying. I just could not stay quiet. It just made me think about the process, the screening process. So generally, in my experience, what I've seen of what I've done is, we pre-screen patient charts for eligibility into clinical trials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then only approach the patients who are eligible for, or seem to be eligible for, the particular clinical trial that we're working on, or the particular 5 or 10 that we're working on at that moment, at that point in time. And we don't often think of offering that chance to every patient or every person who comes through the doors of that hospital or institution or clinic. I wonder if that's a different approach we could take, offering it as whether, that patient may not be eligible for one particular trial at that moment, but giving every patient a chance to sign up to be involved in a clinical trial when it becomes available, one that's right for him or her.
That is something I signed up to do at a hospital, actually, to say, hey, any trial that I could potentially be eligible for based off of my interests, please reach out to me. Is one thing that I've been able to do.
So I was just gonna, this is Edie, I was gonna dovetail into that because I'm seeing very specific organizations in patient advocacy, in patient recruitment and clinical trials begin to attempt to do what you just said, Sophie, at a really broad, high level. And the greatest obstacle is not interest, it is legit the data protection laws. Like they're struggling to get ECs and IRBs to understand what they're doing and that it's meant not to be a formal recruitment for a
Right.
formal, legit, already erected and activated trial. It's a future ask. It's still consent. It's still totally in, the patient's control if they want to be contacted, and they can always change their mind at any time. But it's truly for future, not even in the pipeline yet, trials, just to ascertain.
Right, just to create a bank.
Right, just to
of
create a complete
people.
huge
Yeah.
pool. And we are severely struggling, especially in EU and GDPR, but in other spaces. Jennifer's heard me go off on this. Actually, our colleague Antonio is helping me work on this in Latin America. And I mean, I'll hush up on my comments till I get to him, but I have a thought process about how to go about forcing this issue from a preemptory legal perspective. So just know that's coming. But I really, really open this idea, Brandy, and I'm really interested in finding a way to get beyond the data protection laws. I think it's just a matter of the way our data protection laws were written in the United States and abroad. It was just always presumed that any patient referral into research would come from a clinician. It would come from a major health center. And so they were all written that way. And now suddenly, shock, shock, patients are actually advocating for themselves, right? And they're not waiting for a clinician to do it. They're asking their own questions. And so we don't know what to do with this.
This
We know we have
sounds
the
like
interest.
you have the chocolate sauce on top of our sundae today, Edie. So I'm going to hold you so we can have a little cliffhanger here.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I want to move to Justin. I want to hear one of his awesome questions. And maybe he has some response to Brandy.
So yeah, and I'm glad you took the direction or the conversation in that direction, Sophie. And I'm actually really excited to hear Edie's thoughts on how we would implement something like that. But I'm going to turn around and say, even if we got to that point where we could, have this bank of people interested in clinical trials, or get to a point where at least they're being offered to people, is that enough? Is that going to do what we need it to do? If we can, so if we can get to the point where we're moving past the difference between equal and equality, and I'm not saying that we're there and we got plenty of work there, but I feel like we're starting to move the needle. People are starting to realize, okay, equal isn't enough. I need to achieve equality. And I can't remember if it was Jane or Sol who used the age old metaphor of the standing on the different size boxes to see over the fence. We still need to get to a point where we even know what those barriers are. The height of the box. What are we looking for? And we don't. And I think what it takes is a degree of humility, to realize that you're not going to get it right. It doesn't matter how much time, when you as a researcher, you as a research team were designing your study, it doesn't matter how well intentioned you are. It doesn't matter how much time and effort you put into trying to design your study to make it as equitable and accessible as possible. Because really, the equity, it boils down to an accessibility issue. And I know we, in our culture, we hear accessibility and we think wheelchair ramps, and that we aren't even at that point. But because I've got the ramp for you to get into my facility doesn't mean my study is accessible for you. Getting back to Brittany's point, if you don't trust me as a researcher, my research team, clinical research as an enterprise, because of historical injustices to your community, then my study is not accessible to you. So it's that very broad term of accessibility. How is my study not accessible to you as a patient? And just because, to your point, Sophie, even if everybody that came in the door had it offered to them, that doesn't mean that it works for them. And we can put as much thought into how are we going to get around that as we can, but we're not going to get it right the first time. And so, like I said, you have to be humble enough to know that's the case. And then once you get to that point, one thing that I've found or seen be successful is viewing every new study as an opportunity to not just study the research question of the study, but to study how how was my study accessible or
The
not.
process.
um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And so there's some user design that needs to be done, and I know I've brought that up a handful of times. I've seen it as simple as tacking onto your pre-screening survey. We've got a lot of studies where there's 5-6 questions at the beginning before you're even shown a consent form. Do you meet the major check boxes to even be screened for this study? Then also having a handful of questions assessing your level of accessibility to this study. Why, if you chose not to participate or chose not to even look at the consent form, why not? Why did this study not meet the mark for you? It gets into some questions about now are we collecting data on patients that didn't consent to be part of that study? But that aside, even that you're not going to get right, because you're not going to ask the right questions if you don't know what to be asking. But you have to view it as an iterative process. Every study that I start up gives me an opportunity to make an incremental improvement on the last one that I did, but I can only do that if I intentionally try to bake into my study design ways to get metrics on am I improving, and how where do I have room for further improvement. And that's my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, really making us think about the purpose of the study and what we're keeping track of during the enrollment and follow-up phase of our studies, not just, the safety and performance of the drug or device, but how is our process moving? And are we doing something right? Are we doing something wrong? What can we improve right now? And what can we improve next time? Thank you so much. Amy, you are next on my screen. I hope that's the same for you.
Yeah. So I really want to pick up right where Justin left off. When I was looking at the draft guidance and just the fact that organizations now need to have a race and ethnicity plan, one of the things that really stuck out to me was that sponsors need to have a plan that should outline how they collect data to explore the potential for differences in safety and effectiveness associated with race and ethnicity. Now, so I think that looks, and there has to be a really big focus on data analysis from prior, historical, clinical research to see, what, was their baseline, in terms of their representation of prior studies, and then what was done during those prior studies in terms of either community engagement solutions such as patient reimbursement or travel or things like of that sort. So once you have sort of like an understanding of what was done before, sort of bringing it to the one burning question of today is like in this phase of design and of a study up front is sort of looking at this sort of overall data analysis. But I can't remember who was saying it before, but also really focusing deeply on patient advocacy and patient interviews, advisory boards, all like to sort of really understand what is the barriers and burdens that may affect a certain community, so those things could potentially be eliminated in the actual study design. So that's how you really then sort of set yourself up for maybe more just an equitable patient selection. By looking at the data, How did you perform before? Making sure that you have way more, folks coming into your study in the future, and that you're removing the barriers for them. And something that I've been really interested in lately is change management, and how do you set your organization, really up for like long-term success for diversity? I think that so many times organizations get well-meaning folks who may be passionate about certain issues, but perhaps they move on to other roles. Maybe they leave the organization. How do you retain these folks, or at least retain their, their plans? What are the KPIs they're reporting up? So that you're laying the ground your work for success in the research, but how are you socializing all of that effort internally within the organization, so you're building excitement, you're building awareness of the things you're doing that have really made a difference? So I think that that is really an area that we need. It's so important that we build this network of each other, so we can sort of understand what other organizations are doing and what's been successful, organization to organization. And then, also within the organization, how do you create more awareness of things that are working? What have you done from a diversity recruitment perspective that really helped bring in more diverse folks? Was it things that, were not done before, or other things that, are proven and just doing more of them? So those are the things I wanted to share just in terms of data analysis, setting yourself up for long-term success through change management. And that's my comment on that. I'm not
Thanks.
sure who's...
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, already so many great observations. And really, I just want to contribute a couple observations from the site level, because ultimately, I think a lot of this falls back, no, it falls back on, but it's very intertwined with sites, because, I mean, patients are enrolled through sites. So sponsors, CROs, vendors can talk about this stuff, but ultimately, I mean, it has to be carried out at the site level. So, to speak to sort of something Sophie mentioned, I think, I'm pre-screening charts. I'm not necessarily looking at the demographics of a patient. I'm just looking for patients who match inclusion exclusion criteria. Now, stand back and think about that. I'm a white guy in a primarily white community with white doctors. So who am I likely to come across is primarily white patients. So, it occurs to me that again, I think this was maybe Jennifer who talked about I think we need to see more community partnership with physicians in different communities. And it's not, I think some of that has to be, obviously it's a site, I don't know, say responsibility, but I think we need to see some sponsors also be willing to put their money where their mouth is in terms of awarding trials to these sites and investing in helping prop these sites up if we want to see, some longer term change. And again, I think that the groundwork is there, so to speak, in so much as there are physicians who want to participate in research, and there are companies like mine and so many others who are willing and able and want to go help support these communities. But if you can't get awarded trials, if it cannot be made to be financially viable, it can't happen, or it won't happen. So I think that's an issue. And then I also think that something I've always harped on is that protocols are very restrictive to the point to where they don't really reflect the patient population, period, I think. So you're kicking people out who maybe they don't have the privilege of having years worth of medical history, of having been able to go to a doctor. And so just by default, they're kicked out of the possibility to even participate in studies. So I'd love to see a movement where we, continue to make protocols more reflective of patient populations as a whole. Because again, I think at that point you're able to start to include people that you had to kick out just by virtue of them, being written out of the protocol, so to speak. They never even get a chance. They don't even have the opportunity to be reached out to, as Sophie sort of mentioned. So those are just a couple observations.
You're talking about real world data, right? Enrolling a
That's
patient
it.
Yeah, who would probably the end target of the drug or the device,
Exactly.
or
Exactly.
complicated. They're not simple. Humans are complicated. Yeah, I love
It's
that.
chaos. But that's all I got.
Thanks, Brad. So valuable. Really appreciate you every time. And I love your perspective, boots on the ground, kind of in the trenches perspective, because it's so valuable. And what you're saying is super true. Yes, we need sponsors to start picking up the anvil. We need everyone to partner on this, but the where it's enacted is at the site. So how do we empower sites to start partnering with their community outreach organizations to be able to enroll more diverse patients, unless they are supported in that endeavor? Excellent. Thank you so much. Scott, you are up next on my screen.
Thank you, Sophie, and thanks for all the great perspectives. I mean, one of the benefits, I guess, of going kind of near the end of the screen is we've got all these incredible threads, trying to sort of stick to the OBQ, yet there's like content here for many, many more of these sessions. So thank you to just for everyone for sharing kind of a variety of different perspectives. One of the things that was mentioned earlier that stuck with me was this idea of, think, trying to not boil the whole ocean, but how do we make some specific inroads and tackle a couple specific things regarding, this draft guidance that is out there. As an eternal optimist, I'm thrilled that we have the FDA actually making some inroads on this topic. There's a ton of work to be done. It's going to move very slowly for those of us who've been in clinical development for a long time. I mean, trying to introduce an electronic case report form and move from paper to EDC systems was, this seismic shift that it kind of blew everyone's minds, right? Making these small little changes to, having some remote sites or moving to DCT models away from traditional sites for some evaluations blows people's minds, right? The progress is slow, unfortunately, but like the direction we're headed is good. I really appreciated, Brandy, a couple of your comments earlier, talking to your family and friends like I do around, have you ever been asked to participate in a clinical trial and everyone says no, right? I mean, my grandmother didn't really know what I did until like Pfizer vaccine clinical trials were being sort of talked about in the news, right? So we have a baseline sort of education awareness issue, I think, irrespective of even getting into sort of race and ethnicity, right? A lot of people don't know what clinical trials are. A lot of people involved in them don't really even have the time to communicate them with patients, whether they're Caucasian or otherwise. So there's like a huge hurdle to begin with. And then to get over that and go a little further into trying to reach and create some more equity and create better representation is sort of like a couple steps down the road, it feels like. So I'm glad about a lot of the DCT models that sort of provide some more options regarding geography. But as someone who works in sort of has worked for a CRO or a variety of CROs over the last few decades, we touch a lot of sites, we touch a lot of sponsors. I'm certainly evangelizing like, hey, think differently, right? Like we had a client come to us recently, they wanted to enroll a large African American population in their oncology study. And, their main site was in Utah, right? Good luck with that, right? We need to go where people actually are, right? And we need to go to, as was said earlier, where, investigators and staff, look, think, talk, feel like their constituents, like their patients, right? And because the trust issue is enormous. So, when you break it down and you get right down to like what are some specifics around clinical trials with like equitable patient selection, the real world evidence piece that was just mentioned with Brad, I mean, a lot of times the eligibility criteria that people are carving up in a conference room in New Jersey in a little insulated bubble doesn't really reflect really who patients are. All those inclusion, exclusion criteria, you go through those sometimes and like there's no patients that actually meet a lot of those criteria. So we're starting looking for sort of an artificial group of patients to begin with. Uh, that makes it hard to find patients, let alone find representative or patients or provide equity. A lot there around design of studies, but we need to, like, I think, build this next sort of generation of community-based investigators that are not necessarily at those big academic medical centers that we always seem to go to. Investigators that may not have had the chance to participate in research, but they have the training and they just need a little support. They may see the patients and have trust with their communities, and they're out there waiting to be kind of included. So, Brad, you touched the site's perspective a little more than I do. You probably have some thoughts on that, but I feel like we need to be going where our stakeholders are and trying to work on building trust with them, and trying to connect them with people that are like-minded. And I'll pause there.
Scott, this is Michael, and just a wonderful absorption of what's being discussed here. The problems are just huge. The hurdles are just huge. And we're hoping as a group here, or the co-moderators of this Clinical Trials Clubhouse, are really trying to say, hey, can we, start somewhere? Can we come up with a couple things? And we did that in some of the things that we provided as suggestions to FDA. And I'm going to ask Edie to kind of reprise a little bit of that so that you all are aware of what got sent in, but and then Edie, obviously you'll add your own flair to other comments here. So Edie, please jump in.
Yeah, and I'm going to do them in opposite order, if you don't mind, Michael.
No,
I was
not
going to
at
say
all.
I'll give a reprisal here. I was going to say, but I'm chomping at the bit to get my opinion in here and my thought. And where I was headed as I was listening to everyone, and it's not surprising, it's buried deep in the regs. It's much like me to go there for a reference. But the reason is because when we look at the entire construct upon which, and I'm just going to use the U.S. as an example, but these documents and these types of principles exist in writing and captured in the same types of, with the same types of reverence in other jurisdictions globally. But what we see is that even in the mid-70s, there is significant concern in the Belmont report about this exact principle, right? And when they clarify and when they say exactly what justice is and what they're looking at, they use words like who ought to receive the benefits of research and bear its burdens, right? And they harken back to some of the horrific atrocities that were very under consideration at that time, and certainly don't reflect the depth or the breadth with which we've struggled in this particular area. But you can notice that they even give examples about selection of research subjects needing to be scrutinized to determine if certain classes, welfare patients, particular racial and ethnic minority, etc., are being systematically selected simply because, or in lack thereof, things like easy availability. Now, granted, at the time, the greatest concern of this particular commissioned group of experts was the manipulation or compromised position of a potential subject being forced into research. But the way they wrote it, it goes both directions, right? And so the way I see this playing out is similar, actually, like the example you were using there, Scott, for a second, on technology, because it's a really good indicator of how our world works. We have some early adopters, and we have later adopters, and then we have latest adopters, sponsors. Okay. So when we're talking about that, we have to look at that as also likely being the rubric or the stratification of who, how, and when is going to direct the charge to getting us back to some of these principles that, frankly, we were already worried about decades ago and clearly haven't addressed, but at least are now having more meaningful conversations about, right? And we need to use our individual vantage points, right? And I'll give a couple examples here, to move the construct through. So we're going to see biotech, startup, entrepreneurs who can't shut their mouth like myself, who are going to be your outspoken individuals, activists, some of the great folks who are already on this panel right now who are doing great work in this space. Be the folks who are really starting the conversation, spearheading the conversation. And then you begin to see other interested stakeholders. Usually what comes next is sites, smaller research sites, folks like Brad. I have a great research site I work with that, because of their particular patient population and their expertise that they hold with that particular area of research, they're leveraging that when they're approached by sponsors by saying, sure, we can deliver what you need. We'll have the patient population, we'll have the expertise in this niche area. But in order to work with us to get in the door, here's what you have to do as a part of our community efforts. Here's what you have to participate in. Here's the extra steps we take in recruitment to ensure we have a more diverse population. And we're committed to these ethical principles, right? So you're seeing where sites have a vantage point as they build that rapport, as they are able to leverage what they've built in their communities. The next step for me, very logically, and most of you know I come originally from the IRB world, is then how do you elevate this conversation to a point where, and this is very much reflected in our FDA comments, and Sophie and Michael can tell you this was, where my head went as we were constructing and working on them, of course, but how do we move this to a point where, this is a principle in the Belmont report that every IRB member in the United States should be trained on and understand. So at what point can we elevate the conversation to the fact that IRBs should be having more conversations about inclusion-exclusion criteria being based strictly on science, and why we aren't having some of these broader conversations? And as a part of that, you could begin to have the conversation of the idea that was brought up earlier, which I love, Brandy, which is broad consent, right? So I'm already seeing this in some niche area service providers. I work with a genetic testing and adjudication services company that works almost exclusively in rare disease. And as a part of their clinical consent, they have an opt-in, opt-out for future contact about research, which of course, working in the rare disease space, as most of you know, every single patient opts in. They're thrilled to be contacted about future opportunities, right? It's how the consent's structured. It's how it's approved. It's how it's handled with the patient. It's letting them know it's their option, but it's not undoable. The data protection laws don't totally prevent it as long as you can do it. And so I think we're going to have to come at this from all of our different stakeholder perspectives, but you begin to see where each of us has a role in this conversation and how we can bolster each other finding our role or finding our vantage point and thus leveraging it forward. So I will park my thoughts there. Recap, yes. So I was actually going to pull up here the response. So as Michael was talking, we had the unique opportunity to do a crowdsourced response here to the FDA from our last conversation. Sophie, said your first name because I'm staring at you, and Michael and I were able to essentially collate all of the different ideas and notes that we had brought together and that we had, shared. We wanted to make sure that it was very concise. We wanted to make sure that it was very meaningful, right? And that we were able to get the point across and that we were able to offer some really concrete items as well as some very, specific ideas that we picked up and ran with. I'm trying to pull up, do either of you guys have the actual draft up? I was trying to go through the headlined points because Michael did a phenomenal job, and maybe I'll let you just sum it up real quick, Michael, of introducing the idea of, in fact, what we were trying to do, and we made sure it was very well understood that it was a crowdsourced venture, right? And that while we were really just the people who were writing it and conveying it, in that regard. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about that intro, and then I'll go into the areas?
What I will do for the sake of time here too, because our cup runneth over, and
yes, no kidding, right?
We've got. I think we used all the dishes. The fact of the matter is, we're going to run out of time today. But what I will suggest is that we'll get this to Julie, and Julie will make sure that this is posted. And for within the clubhouse, as well as to the extent that we could, Julie, that we could do this via email from the Consuli site. I think that that would be valuable as well. Normally, about 20 minutes ago, we would have reset the room, but everything was going so well, and I do want to make sure that the four remaining people who are up here on the panel, three of whom I know well and have great comments, I have no doubt that we get to them. But again, the
Yep,
Clinical
no, I
Trials
totally agree,
Clubhouse.
Michael. I was gonna say, Julie, I'll go ahead and shoot that over to you right now so you can post it before folks
Perfect.
leave the room, as well as then share it broadly with Consuli. Thanks so much. This is Edie. I am complete.
Thank you, Edie. You are wonderful. And speaking of wonderful, um, back from travels and crazy illnesses here, Christine, can you dive in? And I know you've had several points that you wanted to make earlier. Christine, are you there? Okay. Well, if she comes back on, we'll do that. Arcana?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on stage. Sorry, I just joined at about 11:30 Pacific time, so I'm so sorry I missed the earlier part. So a couple of points and perspectives or insights that I may share. Please pardon me if they are repetition of any of the ones that other esteemed colleagues may have shared earlier. But I wanted to pick up on, the guidelines that the FDA put out. Uh, it has deliberately stayed away from using the words and coming out and recommending that the decentralized clinical trials, because of the whole equity issue, the justice issue, which is the topic of today's conversation. I feel that it's a balance that we as an industry should need to make. We need to start somewhere, and I think this was brought up earlier in the past half hour. My recommendation for some of the best practices that I feel is involving the local community, and having worked especially in the oncology clinical research area for the past 2 and are very much oncology focused, so please take that into consideration. It is as an industry, we need to do better with inclusion exclusion criteria, especially we are excluding large swaths of patients with any even prior or not so required exclusion criterias. And there is an initiative and a mandate from the FDA for the industry to stop doing that, to make these inclusion exclusion criteria more broader so that these trials are more accessible to the cancer patients. And number two, we celebrate International Clinical Trials Day, once a year. How about a radical idea like, people in local communities who avail of social media and local television, those outlets as well, having local doctors appear, just as we have food segments on those shows. How about a clinical trial segment and showcase a particular trial that a local site may be running there, to generate awareness and education? I know this may sound very radical perhaps, but just, we need to educate more and more people about these, and engage, most importantly, educate them through engaging the local community, the local doctors who look like them, talk like them, like the local community, so people can relate to them, and the trust is there in what message they have to convey. So I wanted to throw those a couple of radical ideas out. I'm sure I want to give an opportunity to some of my other colleagues. So I'll pause here for others to join in. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute.
Oh, we're so happy
Michael,
to
can
have
you
them.
hear me?
Yes, now,
Oh,
Christine, you're back.
I'm
Please.
back. I have a ton of notes written here, and I know that I have a lot to say. I actually was late today because I was entering into a longitudinal study on COVID. So that was an interesting one. Really, it needs
I
work.
congratulations, and I'm sorry. So anyway, go for
Yeah.
it.
Well, I want to kind of change the conversation a little bit. And I know that we're talking a lot on this site, on the site level. But I think one of the things that I've, in my travels and at the conferences that I've been at, the main issue here that we have is trust, right? And our relationship between HCPs and patients is completely broken. It's marred by industry. It is a mess, right? And I think there's ways that
And
we can.
you're bringing it right back to where Brittany started this. Let's talk
Oh,
trust.
good. Well, I missed that, but thank you, Brittany, for bringing that in. I think that is a huge part that we are missing. And I recently was teaching with some med students at Stanford, and they had come up with an idea, right? Same ideas that we all come up with in industry. But my thought process was, why aren't we involving these hospital systems? Why are we having unbranded sites for pharmaceutical drugs and for certain things when we need one stable resource for our communities? And what I think needs to happen, and you can shoot me if I'm wrong, but I think we need to involve these hospital systems. We need to have a platform within each hospital, within each community that works with grassroots organizations who are giving the patients in that area the resources that they need to survive. Our national organizations for diseases, they do great things in putting out great resources, but they cannot help with individual communities, right? And so I think there needs to be a bridge and something where grassroots organizations pair with hospital systems to put together resources. And then industry and trial sites can come to those sites and be vetted by the hospital, by the physicians, by the patients, and say, great, we love this. We're putting it on this platform for everybody in our area, and really bring back that trust and that relationship that is so sacred that is now not even there. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. The education on clinical trials. I go to these clinical trial conferences and I hear all of these people raving about how we're getting so many people involved. But again, when I talk to general population of people, they have no idea what trials are. And we're moving to decentralized trials before we even understand regular clinical trials, right? And I think there is a way to actively involve the patients in these things, but in ways of giving them a sense of ownership over their data, right? Really training them on how to collect data, making them effective data partners as we move on, right? We're moving to an age where we are having patients monitor their own care at home without the supervision of a physician. And they're not collecting the right data. They're not giving us the key points that we really need to collect. And they could be if they were effective partners and knew why this data mattered, why it's so important to collectively collect these things, right? And really working on that trust level. I think we miss so many opportunities. We get into a disease space, we're pushing one trial. If that doesn't work out, we then abandon this community when we have potential to really build a relationship, find out what's happening, and build trials off of what we're seeing. And I think that that's kind of missing there. So I could go on and on, but I really think there needs to be more of an involvement of the hospital systems in this, and really pulling in the grassroots organizations who work within the community to provide resources to those people in the community. It's about trust, right? And people trust, regardless of whether somebody's opinion is right or wrong, they trust certain people. And so those are who we need to seek out, the people who have the trust in the community, and working with them. And how do we effectively talk to patients, right? We all talk about empowering patients. And honestly, I'll tell you, you cannot do that if somebody doesn't have that already innate in them. So, but how do we give a roadmap to people where they'll be able to make these decisions in the right manner with the right resources and the right information? And again, I think it's that collaboration piece that we're missing. And I think we talk a lot about patients. I'm in conferences where they tell me patients don't know what to do with their data. We can't give them this information. They don't know what they're going to do with it. But people are educating themselves. And I see patient organizations in other countries who are organizing, who are holding that data and saying, we have all of this. We have the people. We want to participate, but this needs to meet our needs as well. And so I'm going to leave it there for a
Christine,
minute.
no, you know what? I don't know how we did this, Sophie and Edie, but we managed to get, from what it looks like, just about every stakeholder that I can think of at the table today. So, Christine, thank you very much. I do want to make sure in the closing minutes here that we hear from, an actually certified patient advocate from Sandra. Please, Sandra.
Yes, and thank you so much. Hopefully, everyone is having a good day. I come today, as you said, Michael, I am a board certified patient advocate, but today I'm a patient. And I'm sitting here listening to this whole conversation, which I want to thank Edie for, because I don't know if she realizes this or not. But the last month when I was here, she said something that touched me and it hit home, and it really hit home today. So as a patient, I'm sitting here listening to everybody talk. Everybody's coming up with these great ideas on how we can do this and how we can do that. But I'm also at the same time hearing how we, when it comes to justice, how can the system of clinical trials or the system of healthcare, period, include justice when we're discluding people based on either race, either social economic background? I mean, are we seriously talking about doing something about justice to ensure that all have access to clinical trials? Or are we just sitting around just having conversations based on talking points where there's nothing else that's going to happen with this information other than it to be considered as a talking point conversation? So as a patient, if someone could quickly answer that or answer it for me offline, I'd be forever grateful. Thank you.
Sandra, you bring it, girl. I am happy to hear you voice that because we have talked a great deal about, and a lot of this is just socializing and understanding. We as a group individually, we need to participate in that, but you are absolutely right. Scott referred to it, Brittany referred to it earlier. We've got to get some practical stuff out of that, and that's one of the reasons why we felt like answering the FDA draft guidance when they were giving us an open opportunity to give them some concrete suggestions. That's what we tried to do, and that's really just opening the door. We have every opportunity as a group or individually to submit more to the FDA because at least theoretically they're working for us. So Nodar, before we run out of time here, let me quickly go to you and let you add a few thoughtful comments.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll just be really brief, and honestly, the points I was going to make have already been made, but just kind of reiterating the issue of social determinants of health and how that they don't only play a role in health outcomes, but play a big role in terms of child recruitment. And, if we can't address the large systemic issues where large communities of individuals don't have access to basic health care or health insurance, then they're never going to be seen in a clinic, let alone, be presented with the possibility of enrolling in a clinical trial. And so I think at the same time, we have to put pressure on politicians or whoever to push for, universal health care, or at least to continue to bridge that gap so that everyone has equal access to healthcare in this country.
Yeah, outstanding. And I know you've been very active in a number of other categories of events and things that are affecting certainly the U.S. communities. It all seems like in some ways a vicious circle here. Um, Let me ask Sophie to go ahead and kind of pull together and summarize a little bit, and we'll take this out because it's very, very clear that starting today with the topic on justice and with next month's discussion on equity, not equality, but equity, we're going to have an awful lot more to discuss. Really appreciate everybody. Sophie,
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for giving me the hard job.
you're good at it. That's why you got it.
Oh man, we got so many great insights today. And, I don't know how many of you know, but I do work at the sponsor level. So I am taking vigorous notes here because, yeah, it has to start at the design level when we are even just thinking about designing a trial around a product, right? An investigational product, even for post-approval trials as well. So, and then we have to think about all of our partners. And that's what I keep hearing in different ways from all of you, from, the sponsor, CRO, to the site, to the vendors, to the partners, to the communities, to the patient advocates. we all need to get on the same page to make sure that this is going to happen. I think Nodar brought up a good point that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, is that we have a deeper seated problem, which is beyond clinical trials, right? We are talking about our healthcare system, which I don't know about anyone else, but I'm pretty sure it's broken. You know, when we have a pandemic that we are not prepared for, and millions of people die, and we have a shortage of physicians, nurses, and all kinds of other healthcare professionals, and are pulling people. I live in New York, so this hit us really hard. We pulled 2,000 people out of retirement. You know, physicians and nurses in their late 70s and 80s, in order to cover, because we didn't have enough professionals to handle the crisis. And you know, that just points to our broken system. So that's really the root cause. But how do we address it as clinical trial professionals? Can we start with small things like including clinical research, patient advocate communities in our clinical trial process? You know, maybe sponsors need to advocate and support that from the trial design perspective when we are um, you know, choosing sites for to enroll clinical trials. This should be maybe be part of the budget or the contract that, you know, every site is connected to some community outreach personnel, organizations, committees within their local geographic area to ensure that they're reaching patients in their local geography from different backgrounds. And we're not looking at only patients who are eligible for the trial based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, but also patients who are interested and available and have been underserved. I think Brandy said it very well earlier. Underserved doesn't necessarily mean poor. It just means that the people who are not being reached, people who are not being offered access to clinical trials. And we need to dig into that and find out why that is happening. Brandy brought up so many other good points too. And we have so many points here, starting from the clinical trial site level with the diversity of the PIs, the sub-Is, the staff, the non-clinical trial staff, all the way to, you know, our legislation, our legislators, and our health advocates at a government level. So I think we have a lot to unpack. We have a lot to think about. How can we, how can we take some of these small suggestions or some of the large suggestions and create small ways to just start increasing diversity, looking specifically for patients with different backgrounds, and also clinical trial professionals with different backgrounds. I like the idea. I forgot who brought it up, but somebody brought up the idea of healthcare professionals, especially physicians, in certain geographic areas and part of certain cultures that may not have that perfect clinical trial background with, you know, 40 published papers and, you know, 5 or 10 years in clinical trials, but have access to that patient population, are trusted in that community, and can learn. Can we invest in teaching and training those healthcare professionals so that we get access to those patients and the patients get access to the clinical trials? Can we make that ahead of time investment in order to get the gains at the end? I think that should be part of the plan that FDA asked sponsors to make. What is our plan for increasing diversity? What are the metrics we're going to use? How do we ensure we are following the plan? And how do we ensure that the plan is successful? So I think this is one way we can incorporate those into our our plan.
Sophie, can I
And we're
can
gonna,
I make a quick
yeah,
comment really
Christine.
quick? I just wanted to say I spoke with another company, a small CRO, and they recently took a pledge to donate 1% of their time and their profits to a philanthropical nonprofit organization. I think that was a huge step and a huge move for them to commit to that. And I think that's something that maybe some other organizations should look at, right? Is really committing something to a nonprofit organization or a group, right? And really giving that time to the community as well. I just thought it was a great idea when they told me they took a pledge and they were committing to doing this. So I think it's something for other people to think about as you're, building out plans and everything else. But just my thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined today. We are over time at this point, and I'm pretty sure we're going to spill over some of these topics into our next one burning question on equity next month. So I'm going to let Michael close us out at this point, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sophie, again, sterling job. Thank you so much. Can't do this without you. Edie, thank you so much as well. In closing, gratitude to the co-moderators and to all of our panelists, many of whom have had to drop off here, but clearly the audience here and those of you participating and offering your thoughts has been great. I'm going to hand this back to Julie, and those of you who can stay on for a couple more minutes, she'll take us out all the way to closing music. So Julie, thank you so much for all the organization and the effort that you and Spencer put into this. And we will be speaking with you next month. And clearly, there's so much more to talk about. Thanks again. This is Michael signing
Thanks so
off.
much, Michael. Thanks so much, Michael. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Really a great discussion, as always. And once again, there's just never enough time to hit on everything. So I can't wait for the next one. In closing, again, I'm Julie Schmidt, Project Manager at Consuli and host for Consuli Conversations. And as we wrap, just a few things to note. If you've missed any of the conversations or pinned links, and or you want to find a certain person that you wanted to connect with and may have missed, that may have already left the room, something like that, you can always use the replays feature. You could skip through the conversation from speaker to speaker. You can find that in our club profile. So just tap the little greenhouse at the top, follow Consuli Conversations, and in our profile you'll find our upcoming and past rooms. And from there, you'll find the replays. So really great way to revisit some of the conversation or specific people that you might want to find. So be sure to follow me, our moderators and panelists here today, and check out our other clubs as well, including Long COVID, Data Dignity, and Sickle Cell, and get a good idea of how all these thread together. Give us a follow on social media. Our handle is at Consuli_Inc. Again, you can find that in my profile, in my bio. And for any direct questions, comments, feedbacks, if you'd like to join this panel for the next round, or if you have anyone to recommend, please reach out directly. My email is in my bio. Love hearing from you guys. So additionally, I did have the public virtual whiteboard pinned to the top of the room. I'll put that back as well. Please peruse the past highlights from rooms, any comments, add anything like that. The item that Edie was talking about sharing, we'll be putting that on there as well for anybody that wants to take a look at that. It's in a PDF form, so we'll add that to there. And again, for those that joined during our event or after our opening announcements and don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with the mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy. Experts do suggest your individual data is worth $20,000 per year, so we do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent and assemble their data, including health records, labs, prescriptions, wearables, quality of life surveys, things like that. Importantly, members receive smart-matched, individualized offers from us for opportunities including to participate in clinical trials as well as data trials and other offers. So if any audience members want to be a part of the data dignity movement and get a data agent and or participate in a clinical trial, you can sign up to be matched to a study at consuli.net. consuli.net. That is currently pinned to the top of the room. You can follow that link. There's no cost for anyone to join our movement, and check us out. Check us out on socials. Very much looking forward to the next Clubhouse discussion. Thanks so much, everyone. I will leave the room open with a little music lingering in the background so everyone can just poke around and check out other bios. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thanks, Jules. Great, great room. So many ideas. I can't even, just in the chat alone, there's so many ideas in there.
Michael, I'm going to be sending you an email of something I'm working on with you guys. So
I can't wait to get email from you. How you feeling anyway? You doing
I'm
okay?
doing okay, right? 2 emergency
Good.
use authorizations on
I
drugs,
know.
and
I
I got the
I
Evusheld. So
I've been watching you. You know, I'm cataloging all the dresses that you wear.
I'm trying to keep a variety. Now you make me totally self-conscious.
Aww.
I don't think that's possible. I was just cracking up. You look fantastic.
Thank you. I like to tell people I always look my best on the brink of death.
Oh my God.
I
You're
know.
too
A little
silly.
morbid, but you know
I
what? We
know,
all
but
need to
hey,
laugh.
if you can't be a little macabre, what can you do, right?
Right.
So, all right, just mark me down in your book for another hug and a kiss, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Yeah, alrighty.
All right.
Thanks, you
Take
guys.
care. And Sophie, thanks so much. We need catch-up time.
Yeah, I know.
I know. I hope you're.
It'll happen, Michael, on the 25th hour of the 8th day of this week.
Yes, exactly. Yes, isn't it? I told somebody earlier. I said, "Yeah." They said, "How's it going?" I said, "It has been a long week today."
That's exactly.
Today, yeah, exactly.
Michael, I think it's more like a long year today.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
been crazy. I think fortunately we've gotten past some of this convention season here. I know you, Christine, you've been to 3 or 4 different places,
Oh,
and
yeah. You know, I actually
um,
just came from Tal Behar's PMWC.
oh, good. Okay,
Oh,
that's a cool
amazing.
meeting. That's a cool meeting. Yeah, yeah. Are you going to
Yeah.
be going to D Farm to Disruptive,
Uh,
or
I
or
am not.
are you
I'm
going
going to be
to
doing a
CNS?
Reuters. I
You're going
have
to do
CNS.
CNS. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have CNS. So if anyone's interested in CNS, I have a discount code for first time attendees. Hit me up.
Okay. Cool.